Welcome to the C21 Canada AI Use Case Project Series in partnership with Dell, where we spotlight practical, ethical, and scalable examples of AI innovation across Canadian education. And happy AI Literacy Day. Today is Appreciation Day for AI. So I'm your host, Robert Martellacci, CEO of C21 Canada. Today I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Steve Joordens, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto Scarborough. Steve is one of the leads behind the Round 3 C21 Dell Technology AI Use Case project entitled AI-Based Oral Assessment, Getting Assessment Right and Driving Learning in the Process. This use case tackles one of the most urgent questions facing educators today. How do we ensure assessment remains valid, meaningful, and learning rich in an age where generative AI can produce polished student work at the click of a button? And Dr. Steve Joordens, thank you for joining me. And wow, what an image I'm sharing from your use case project. Talk to me about the inspiration.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at some point, I think very much of us going through a paradigm shift in education, like a Thomas Kuhn paradigm shift, where we imagine that the previous way of doing things hasn't been working, and we have to start imagining a whole new way of doing things. And when I do that, I think, well, what has to change first? And I think of assessment naturally, and I've come up with this phrase. I'll say it loud and proud, I guess. I would like to be the man before I retire that carves the end date on the tombstone of multiple choice testing. I really see multiple choice testing as a sort of deal with the devil that we did where, it gives us objective measures of learning at scale, but isn't measuring what we care about. I don't even think it measured very well what we cared about when we cared mostly about knowledge. But as we go into this world of AI, knowledge is becoming less relevant. The skills of working with that knowledge well are becoming more relevant. And we need an assessment approach that can assess what we value. And so in this use case, I make the argument that we can go back to oral assessments, the way we
Right.
used to assess before we tried to do it at scale. But with conversational AI agents now, students can go
Wow.
through a learning experience, and that agent can now interrogate them, ask them all these questions about what they learned, ask them to demonstrate certain skills. I think it can provide a much more holistic measure of learning. It can still do this at scale. It can still provide objective, fair measurements. And I think if we get that right in a sort of reverse design thinking, if we're thinking about the future of education, we should start with assessment. If we get assessment right, then we can start thinking about all the other ways we can sort of help our students succeed at that assessment. So kind of knowing where we want them to get to, I think, is an important first step towards thinking about all of the other innovation, where I also think AI can play a major role.
Fascinating. Thank you for that. And there's a lot of moving parts here. And one thing I'll say, when I play my faculty hockey at York University, year 39 this coming year, by the way, or 40, I might be touching on. I know I look a lot younger than I am.
Oh yeah,
But
barely 20. Yeah.
the profs lament about students and their level of engagement or disengagement, I should say, when it comes to attending class.
Mm.
You invited me to a class in your new circular lecture hall in the brand new innovation complex a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And on my way there, as I was driving along the 401, stuck in traffic, I'm estimating in my mind how many students might be there on a Friday morning at 9 a.m., which I arrived late and you pointed me out. Thank you for doing that. Great vision, because there were, it was a full house to my surprise, and I'm the one coming in late. And
I
and
had warned the students ahead of time that I had
oh
a
my
friend
God,
coming.
thank
So
you
I
very
said, hey,
much.
when I point him out, everybody say good morning, Robert. And it worked out very well.
Yeah, and they said, "Hi, Robert."
Yeah.
Yeah, so in unison, a full house of some 1,500 students. I was shocked and I was pleasantly surprised because your lecturing skills and level of engagement is very high. And I think we can't ignore the storytelling aspect of teaching and learning in the age of AI. Let's
Yeah.
touch on that for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned that I'm lucky. I teach introductory psychology, which I call the sort of greatest hits of psychology. And of course, psychology is all about learning about yourself. So I think I have some advantages in that regard where I can tell students stories about themselves, but highlighting things that they didn't see or didn't appreciate, or even for an example, we'll just talk about how every one of us perceives the world in our own way. That there's the real world, but then it goes through all of our experiences, all of the previous memories we have, and that shapes the reality we ultimately perceive. Your reality is different than my reality, is different from everybody's reality. And so we talk about some of those things, and it always gets students going, hey, wait a minute, is this why we have arguments over politics when we're both watching the same thing, but we're not
Right.
seeing the same thing? So yeah, at any rate, I've learned early on, and I have to say I've learned, just like any good performer, which stories, which jokes work well, which don't. I'm very good at making it look like I just talk off the top of my head every time I'm in a classroom, but it's been 20 years of building the material up. And yeah, it tends to work well now, and it really helps us get a good rapport with the students, which is what I really love.
And you talk about being a performer, and you are a member in a band. So
Yes.
how has being a member in a band perhaps helped you be more self-aware when it comes to engaging students in your
Well,
way you
that's an interesting question, because one of the things you run into as in a band quite often is you go to a bar and you're hoping there's going to be 200 people there and there's 4 people there. And what you have to do is just kind of tell yourself it doesn't matter. Those 4 people are here to have a good time. And our job is now to try to create an experience where they really have a great experience. So it really got me, I think, thinking where crowds don't matter how big a crowd is. You never know who's in a crowd. If somebody comes to class, like even if I didn't have the full classroom, if I just had a smattering of students, it's still about doing your thing and doing it well. And so I do try to walk into class. I consider it one of my two therapies. Playing music is one, lecturing is another. When I go into that class, I get to just sort of have fun and try to keep them not looking at their phones. That's part of the, you talk about a round
Oh my
classroom. One of
God.
the advantages of the
Right.
round classroom is the furthest student is just 10 rows from me at all times. And so anywhere I turn, I'm fairly close and I can look them in the eye, and they know I can look them in the eye. And I think that just kind of helps create this situation where, yeah, we try to get the phones down, try to get the interaction happening in real time. We use response devices too to try to kind of ask students questions every now and then and let them provide data that we can all share. Just, we have to compete in this attention economy now. We have to create engaging experiences, or we're just not going to have their minds. And so yeah, that's I've given into that a while ago. I've not tried to fight that, and I've tried to say,
Oh,
how can my
well,
class be one that students just want to come to?
I thought it was brilliant, and you were quite the orator, center stage in the round, and there you were pontificating and very animated,
Yep.
and you really lit up those kids. And I have a great respect for educators who are able to achieve that goal, and hence it was a full house. Not
Mhm.
only a full house, overflowing full house, where students were lined around the perimeter, sitting on the floors. And how does that make you feel? You're obviously doing something right,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really good, and just the vibe in the classroom is one thing,
right?
and then after the classroom, when you get the students that come right up to the front and they want to continue asking questions, when you can tell you've kind of lit them up, not just is this on the exam, but more like how does this work then, and how does that work? When you've really stimulated the curiosity, and that's a big part. I have a YouTube video somewhere where I talk about how I try to use curiosity driven learning, where I try to introduce something at the
Brilliant.
beginning of a lecture that kind of makes them go, how does that work? And then by the end of the lecture, they understand it, but it's revealed sort of gradually. So you try to, feed that curiosity. But I think curiosity is one of the best drivers for implicit learning, for the right kind of
Right.
learning. Yeah.
And curiosity is definitely one of, and creativity are one of the seven C's of C21 Canada.
Yeah.
Happy AI. Uh, Appreciation Day.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are in the middle.
Not everybody appreciates AI, by the way,
Well,
Robert.
we are appreciating it, and we take it for what it's worth. So, human-centered AI, ethical, and
Yep.
purposeful,
Yep.
right? I just happen to have my book handy that
There
we're.
you go.
This is
Shock.
our final draft before we go to full press, but
Excellent.
making a few uh, enhancements. But being human in the age of AI, a playbook to mastering key skills AI can't replace.
Fantastic.
You are irreplaceable, may I say, Dr. Jordans.
I mean, we'll see, right? those
Okay,
are those are strong
you
claims
know,
these days.
you will be, have the option, let's say the option to retire because there's no retirement age in Ontario any longer.
Right.
And here we are, uh, more mature adults, and we're still here very much in the saddle. One of the fascinating things, you've taken it a step further to create a digital twin and talk to me about your lab, your talk lab
Yeah, yeah.
inspiration.
So I mean, as we talk about that, I mean, you and I knew each other in what almost seems like a past life when I was pushing Peer Scholar, which is still a fantastic educational technology, by the
Correct.
way. But Peer Scholar was all about enhancing critical thought, creative thought, a lot of these C21 kinds of skills. Um, when it was really hard to innovate in education pre-AI. It was just everything was kind of
Mhm.
set. It's hard to bring in new ideas and new things. And one of the things that excited me about AI kind of having the splash it did is it kind of destroyed some things. It's caused
Mm.
a lot of challenges in education, especially around assessment, which has always been close to my heart. And I kind of view that as okay, now people are much more open to innovation. Now they're much more open to reimagining. And for me, that's one of the reasons why I might not be retired yet, to be honest with you, because I fully understand there are challenges to AI. I fully understand there are negatives. I like that people are worrying about these and thinking about these. Me being who I am, I naturally look for the opportunities. So, in addition to those negatives, there are also some
Right.
positive opportunities. And, I identified three things I thought we never did well in education: assessment,
Yeah.
supporting students at scale, and teamwork. And in all three of these
Brilliant.
cases, as I kind of thought through them, I'm like, wow, with conversational AI, we can now do things in those spaces we just couldn't do before. They were impossible.
Remarkable.
We can do high touch at scale, which is a small term, high touch at scale. When you unpack it in your mind, it's like that virtual twin that you just described to me. It
Right.
can serve 1,800 students. It can talk to 20 students at a time. It can
Amazing.
generate test questions for those students on the fly, which I can't do. They can just
Right.
ask it, question me about the memory chapter, and it'll just do it. And so it's like I now have a version of me that 1,800 people can access at any time, 20 at a time. That's high touch at scale. And when I kind of realized that was what was possible now, it was like, wow, that's really kind of changed the game and really paved the way for an education system where we do high touch assessment at scale. That's the focus of this particular use case. And
Right.
getting assessment right, I really argue if we can do that as a first step, other things will happen naturally after that. That's the place where we have to start. We're having a funny when I give talks to this. I like to have a little bit of fun, so I have what I call
Right.
my death to multiple choice thing. And I don't know if you remember when we were at
Right.
Upper Bound in Alberta. You were in the
Yes.
crowd, and I had a bunch of educators in front of me, and I got them to chant "death to multiple choice, death," and
Oh,
they will happily do so. Educators are
there,
quite happy to
there's your
consider
two. I had to
alternatives.
share the tombstone again for
Yeah.
our audience. But
Yeah.
talk to me about how the students are doing in all this,
Well, and if we can
Dr.
actually
Jordan.
scroll down a little bit here, and I'll tell a little bit of a story. There's a little word cloud
Okay.
just below on that. Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Right
yep,
there.
there it is. Yep. So what this word cloud represents is I had students go through this assignment in Peer Scholar, this assignment trajectory where I said you can use AI when you do it, but use it the right way. Use it as a tool, and I kind of defined to them, how they should be using AI to help them ultimately get to the result that I suggested. But then after they did all that, they then spoke to an AI who interrogated them about how they did the project. What are the steps you took? How did you use AI? How did you do whatever? So
Cool.
it did an oral assessment of what they went through. 1,800 students in one weekend, it assessed. And then when those students came back to class on Monday, I said, if you could give me one word to describe your reaction to this kind of assessment, what would that word be? And this is what we see in the word cloud here. And you will see, by the way, I can see an annoying up
Yeah,
there. You can see,
annoying.
it's not like it's universally positive, but when you look at the big things, unique, new, cool, different, fun, assessment, fun, innovative, insightful, engaging, provoking, so what I say from this in my when I'm just trying to be,
Mhm.
not too pushy, is we're at least not getting revolution. It's certainly not the case that students are seeing this and going, no way, this is a horrible way to be assessed.
Right.
At the very least, they're intrigued, and they seem to be on board. And so, I think they understand the limits of multiple choice testing too, and
Right.
especially in a world where knowledge is at our fingertips. Any
Right.
question that's on a multiple choice test, they can answer 10 years from now with a click of a button on their phone. But working with that knowledge to solve problems, to work with other individuals, those are the skills we need to focus on. And so that's where we need to be able to move assessment. And multiple choice just can't go there.
Right. And so death and multiple choice is your mantra. What's holding us back?
Well, I mean, I think one thing, I think the good news is, from my perspective, as I talk to educators about this, they are open. I just gave a talk in Berlin at the University Future Festival, which was fantastic, and
Cool.
they're all over it. And we've got a group, but I think it's something we have to do as a community. It is core. We're like we've been kind of addicted to multiple choice testing for a long time. To change, we have to know it works, and that's what this use case is sort of showing. Hey, the logistics work,
Right.
you can do it. One question is, what do you do after a student's interrogated? What do you do with that transcript? um, that's kind of interesting, because one notion could be, oh, you have a TA grade it, which is what we actually did. We did not have the AI do the grading for this use case, but it could. And once we can trust it to grade it accurately and fairly, then I
Mhm.
think, with one simple caveat of also saying to the student, by the way, if you don't like what the AI gave you, write a little critical thinking piece about why it's wrong, and then send that along, and a human will grade it for you. And so I think we could have a hybrid where the AI is doing 95% of the grading, 95% of the assessment, or 100% of the
Mhm.
assessment. And a human could just do enough to kind of keep ensuring everything is fine. Why that's sexy, by the way, I'm going to mention this a little bit. We've
Mhm.
talked about me lecturing. As a teacher, I've loved teaching. I
Mhm.
haven't loved being the guy that then assesses them. I
No.
love the dynamic of saying, I am the one that will prepare you for that evil assessor. Not the evil assessor, but my job is to make sure you're going to go in there and do the best you can do. And my job isn't to make sure the class has a 65 average or a 60 average. I don't want to be that guy. And
Right.
so we can now separate and have the AI do the assessment part. It can give really good feedback at scale, better than an average prof or TA would. And I think it can produce really valid marks. So what do we have to do? We have to convince everybody we can do this in a fair,
Right.
valid, accurate way. So that means research. I've been pulling together. This is more of the fun. We have
Right.
something called the Horde, which is pitchfork in hand, trying to overturn multiple choice testing, going up
Mm.
the hill to get rid of the demon. So we're building out the Horde. If anybody wants to be part of the Horde, steve.jordens at
Brilliant.
utoronto.ca. These are educators who are willing to try it in their classrooms, and maybe even engage in specific research questions that they have around this, so that we can start to make sure we're doing it in a highly accurate, highly valid way. And I actually think we can reach a tipping point with multiple choice. I think when we get enough
Fascinating.
evidence and enough community involved, we could just see it change. And this will
Brilliant.
happen in e-learning first, because e-learning multiple choices, anybody can cheat their way through any e-learning multiple choice test. So they need alternatives in e-learning now. And they're available, but then I think it will filter through to all forms of learning. And I think that'll be a very good thing.
Looking ahead, what advice would you offer K-12 and post-secondary leaders who are rethinking assessment and response to AI while still waiting to preserve the academic integrity,
Yeah.
equity, and human-centered learning.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is expand your thought, because when everybody talks about AI and assessment, they talk about cheating. And sometimes it's like
100%.
it comes right down to cheating. And so there's so much to think about in terms of AI and assessment, the positive impacts it can have, the negative impacts it is having, and we got to think big. And you and I have a friend named Katina Popolkas at Dell,
Yes,
and Katina,
legend.
I credit one day for we heard somebody talking about cheating with AI, and she said we shouldn't talk about it that way because that makes it like it's the students are doing something wrong. What has really happened is we educators have lost what we should call assessment validity. It is our role to assess how much the students have learned, and we're expected to do that in a valid way, and we're not. And that's not the student's problem. That's our problem. That we're supposed to
100%.
give them the learning and assess them well. And so that's why I say look at this big sphere. Don't just look at what's wrong, but look at, okay, how can we then do assessment right? And are there opportunities now that didn't exist 10 years ago when we were thinking about this issue? And I think there are. And for example, even if you think of online assessment, imagine you went through an online course, but now you're talking live to an AI, maybe even with a camera open like you have now,
Right.
so that we know it is a human. That's awful hard to cheat on that when it's just asking you questions and you have to respond in the moment and you have a timed period to show this
Wow.
AI how much you know. That can deal with the cheating issue while also producing a much better approach to how to assess the student learning. So that's what I would say. Don't get hung up on the challenges, accept them, but then think bigger, and maybe there's ways forward that will really leave us in a better place. And I truly believe there are.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I love your positivity and really tackling one of the most complex challenges in education today when it comes to assessment. Final
Yep.
thoughts to share before we wrap up.
Final thoughts. Anybody wants to be part of the horde? Anybody loves what we're doing? Please reach out, because we really do realize we need education community big. And I'm happy to be a friend with you and Mindshare and C21 and Dell and all these
Brilliant.
people in Canada that are doing great work to try to enhance education. I'm lucky to have such great friends. I would like to have more. If anybody wants to come and be a friend of this initiative, please connect with us. We would welcome you with open arms.
Dr. Steve Joordens, grateful for your time today.
Thank you. You as well, Robert.
Thank you for sharing this important work and for helping us think differently about assessment in the age of AI. At C21 Canada, we believe these kinds of practical use cases are essential as education systems move from awareness to responsible action. This work reminds us that the goal is not only to respond to AI disruption, but reimagine learning and assessment in ways that are more authentic, more human, and more future ready. To learn more about this in round three of the AI C21 Dell AI use case project, visit c21canada.org. My name is Robert Martellacci of C21 Canada and Mindshare. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.